So have you ever heard the phrase, the hoes are winning? Now, let me be clear. I ain't calling nobody a hoe. That's what they said. They said the word hoe. All right? I'm just relaying the message. But the whole premise is this idea that the women who are very superficial, very putting themselves out there, showing a lot of skin on the internet and things of that nature are the ones that are getting wifed up by men, while the quote unquote good conservative girl, woman is being overlooked, right? And that is so far from the truth. That's not what's really going on. A lot of those women, yes, may get tons of attention, okay? But that doesn't mean that the man marries them or even views them as potentially a long-term partner. It's just that their lust causes them to chase after these types of women. And it creates this perception that that's what men really want, when in reality, that's not the case for a long-term relationship. Now, that whole premise and the fact that I saw this TikTok about why do men marry plain Jane women over pretty women brought me to doing this video. Now, I'm not even gonna lie to you. I didn't watch the full TikTok. I just saw it and it captured my attention. I was like, I want to talk about this because I do think there's this misunderstanding with this whole dynamic. Okay. And I want to break down what men really think about these quote unquote pretty women. When I say pretty, because listen, everyone's beautiful in God's eyes. and I'm not here to say who's prettier than the other. No. But I do think we can agree there's like these women who are really out there. I think you guys know what we're talking about. Or overly pretty. Like they get tons of attention. There are women, a lot of women get attention, but these women just get like an exorbitant amount of attention. And so, again, that attention doesn't equal a man trying to be serious with them. And here's one of the big reasons why. And after I give you some of the reasons, I want to give you two very toxic reasons why men choose to be with the quote unquote plain Jane, conservative, whatever you want to call it, woman. So the first reason why they're choosing that over the overly pretty woman is because a lot of men view overly pretty women as being entitled. All right. So the perception, and I feel the need to mention it because again, sometimes overly pretty isn't about whether anyone else thinks it. If that woman thinks of herself in that way, she can develop a very bougie, self-centered, conceited attitude. Okay. And it reminds me of, and I'm not using this woman to speak on her looks. I'm not judging her in any kind of way. But some of y'all might be familiar with the recent Cheesecake Factory video that went crazy on the internet, right? And the woman was saying stuff like, I'm too pretty to be seen at Cheesecake Factory. I look too good to be brought to these certain types of places. It was a level of an air of entitlement due to her value of herself. Okay. And again, regardless of what anyone else thinks, that's the value she's placed on herself. She has the right to do that. That's her choice. We'll discuss that whole issue in a different video. But the point is, this is a common occurrence among very pretty women, very desirable women, whatever, which scares off a lot of men because it's one thing to deal with that entitlement long enough to have sex with you. It's another thing to deal with that entitlement through a long-term relationship or even a marriage. That kind of entitlement wears a man down. And I feel the need to say this because even, again, this can happen to whether someone's considered overly pretty, average, whatever. This also plays into the whole I'm the prize mentality. Now, some of y'all might be a little triggered by that because you're like, wait a minute, I am the prize. I'm like, hold on, let me explain. I'm a firm believer that we have to stop with, I don't like when men say they're the prize. I don't like when women say they're the prize. We are all the prize. You are the prize for the person that you fit with and can have an amazing relationship with. If we don't see each other as the blessing and just us as the blessing, then we will treat that person as less than. We will devalue them. We will not respect their value and their presence in our life. So it's important that we don't get caught up in that mentality of thinking it's all about us, because that's what undermines and ruins a lot of relationships. So that lack of humbleness, as some may see it, it repels a lot of people. And again, more specifically when it comes to long-term relationships. Now, please don't confuse that with me saying don't have standards, right? Don't confuse this with me saying don't know and embrace your value. But there is a line that we cross that when we become entitled to where like we now don't even appreciate the efforts people make. We don't see the good in people in them having good intentions, right? And them being willing to take the best approach or a positive approach when trying to engage with us, get to know us, whatever the case may be. So you want to be very mindful of that, because I think a lot of women overlook how that entitlement mindset can really scare some guys off. And don't get it twisted, because some of y'all may say, well, it'll only scare off the man who can't provide certain things, right? That's not necessarily true. I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm a very generous guy. If you watch my previous videos, I absolutely believe in being a provider, taking care of a woman. I have no problem with paying for everything, right? But if I get a sense of you are entitled, you do not appreciate the things that I do, I won't deal with you anymore. Not because I'm unwilling to provide these things, not because I can't provide these things, but nobody wants to be pouring into someone who doesn't appreciate what they're doing, who doesn't see the value in what they do, who doesn't at least respect it. I'm not saying you got to throw me a parade and jump for joy every time I do something nice, but damn, your attitude, your energy has to be of appreciation. All right. And that goes both ways. That's the reality of it. Because if you have a man that you're dating and he's acting like he's too good and he doesn't appreciate the things you do for him, that's going to turn you off over time as well. So the entitlement mindset is definitely one of the big reasons why a lot of men steer away from the overly pretty woman, so to speak. All right. So now another reason why, and, I'm just keeping it real with y'all with these reasons. So don't get mad at any of these reasons. Okay. I love y'all. Another reason why the man chooses the quote-unquote plain Jane woman over the overly pretty woman is that the plain Jane woman is perceived as less demanding. All right? So, again, the very pretty woman or the very woman who's into herself, not only is she viewed as entitled, but she requires and asks for more. Now, again, I think a lot of you may hear that and immediately view it from a negative perspective of, oh, so that's just men who don't want to step up. No. And don't get me wrong. There are some men who simply want the easiest route possible. They don't want to step up. And if you require too much of them because they are unhealthy and they don't have their stuff together, they will run. This is true. But again, it's all about the line that gets crossed to where it becomes too much of a burden. So, again, using an example of, it's one thing to say, all right, well, I want a man who's going to spend time with me and, take me out here and there, versus, no, he needs to be taking me out every week to a 5-star restaurant or a fancy place. Like, there's a higher level of what is being demanded and expected. All right. Not to mention whether it be even the time and energy that he gives. And part of that reason is because, and again, some of this is reality and some of this is perception, but for that woman who's used to getting tons of attention, some women are used to men just throwing themselves at their feet and doing everything possible to get their attention and win them over. Even if it's not genuine, I love you, I want to be with you for real and marry you, which some of it is. Even if it's just for sexual reasons, there are some men who go all out for these women. And because she's more accustomed to that kind of effort and to the things that those men are giving, because you got some men throwing money at some women, right? Whereas the other woman, if she's not as accustomed to that, may be more flexible, or she's just not raised like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just not her thing. She's never cared for that. Because there are women who have those men throwing things at them and trying super hard, but they just have a level of humbleness within them. They are aware enough to know that I'm not going to let that get to my head. I'm not going to now try to take blatant advantage of these men in that way and now expect every man to operate at that level. They're still realistic with their approach to men, and that may be some of you listening to this. But again, the perception from the man's side is when she looks too good, when she got too much going on, she's going to ask for way more than I can give, or way more to where it becomes now a burden on me. And so again, it's not just the man who can't. Even some of the men who can will say, you know what? I need less pressure. Because it's one thing, like, just to kind of give it more context, it's one thing to be with a woman who expects $100,000, right? And you got to work hard to get to that 100,000, but you can do it. Versus the woman who is happy with your $70,000, but when you give her 100, she's even more happy and appreciative. Like, you gain more from her when you're able to go over that line that you feel is reasonable for you. But when you have someone who's expecting that line that's already so high, so to get there is tough enough, and then to cross it is even more difficult. That might feel like for some guys, you know what? Let me go this route because it's easier. And let me say this, even though I got more points to make. It reminds me of recently, and I know some of this might be sounding bad to y'all, but I'm just, again, being real with y'all. I was in the barbershop a couple months ago, and there was this older man. I want to say he was about 55, 56. And he was just going on and on about how he was dating a woman for years who was what he considered an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10. And it was so difficult. And then they broke up, and he got with a woman he considered a 5. And he is so much happier now. Like, he's like, I would not change this for the world. This is better. Now, some of y'all might be thinking, but that's horrible that he rates this woman as a 5, right? Compared to this woman who's an 8. Granted, but he's not saying I'm not attracted to her. He's not saying I view her as less in the sense of how I value her in my life. He's just acknowledging that, yeah, on the scale of beauty, there's going to be some women who look better than others. But to him, being with her has added an ease that has brought more peace to his life. And he's happy. And he was basically trying to tell the guys in the store, like, yo, stop. Don't focus so much on the looks, because you can find your happiness with someone who may not fit that specific description, but you still have a level of attraction with them and they provide all these other things. But let's keep this going. All right, so here's the next on the list of reasons why men pick the plain Jane woman, quote unquote, over the overly pretty woman, quote unquote. And that's due to insecurity. But here's the interesting part. The insecurity goes both ways. So let's first start with the man's insecurity. All right. I remember even growing up hearing a lot of men say things like, I can't be with a woman who looks too good because she gets way too much attention and I don't want to deal with that. All right. He doesn't want to deal with, and there's various layers to it. For some men, it might be the attention in the sense of, I don't want to feel like I'm in constant competition with other men, or I have to worry about some man coming to take my woman. For some men, it's, I don't want to have to be worried about the threat of other men in the sense of men, depending on where you're from, men trying to talk to your girl while you're walking down the street, and now you have to defend her and yourself, and some of these men getting their butts whooped trying to fight. And then in the end, I hate to say it, in the end, sometimes still losing the woman. Like, some men just like, yo, this is too much. All right. Not to mention that when she's getting so much attention, the microscope that not only is put on her, but is put on him. Because think about it. When that man is with that quote unquote overly pretty woman, he's getting more scrutinized now. All right. And especially in today's world of the internet, you'll have people go, it happens on both sides. You'll have people go in on the partner because they feel like, well, they don't look good enough for them. How they end up with them. And now they're breaking them down and they're hating on them and they're finding ways to devalue that individual, right? So for a lot of people, that's just not a desirable position to be in. And so they just feel like it's an easier life to just be with someone who doesn't get so much attention. Again, though we're focusing on the men, I've heard even women say, I remember one woman said to me, I do not want to be with the best looking man in the room. She just felt like it's too much of a hassle. And so there's a lot of people who intentionally choose someone who, again, is maybe attractive enough to them, but it isn't like super, super strong, because to them, the less attraction comes with more peace, so to speak. Because again, if they have less of attraction to them, then that chances mean that person's not getting a crazy amount of attention. But now let's flip it, because it's not just the insecurity within the man and him, what he doesn't want to deal with. It's also, believe it or not, the insecurity a lot of quote unquote overly pretty women have, or women who view themselves in that way. Because for some women, that mentality is a defense mechanism. They don't truly believe it. They just speak it to like ward off any criticisms. I'm going to think highly of myself before you try to tell me what I'm not, so to speak. But deep inside, they have insecurities. For others, I mean, there's a lot. You would be shocked how many very attractive men and women are very insecure, and sometimes the most insecure. So now that comes with another layer of things you have to deal with in that relationship. And so there's a lot of men who have gotten with a woman like that and have gone through all kinds of hell due to the insecurities and due to the unresolved traumas. You know, and that reminds me, I have to mention this. I didn't put this on the list, but it's a real thing. Like a lot of people have had experiences where individuals who fit into this box have experienced a lot of trauma when they were younger. All right. There's a lot of women again, no matter how you view them as far as how they look, so many women have been sexually abused. So many women have gone through issues in the household in that regard. And so that in itself, that trauma that still might be there for some people starts to come out. Now, that's not really about how they look, because it can happen to any woman, right? But there are some men who believe this tends to be a more common occurrence among certain women. And when you combine that with the insecurity, when you combine that with, because they have dealt with so much men coming at them, they've also seen all kinds of stuff as far as the games men played, or they may have seen an even greater amount of, let's say, married men or taken men still trying to talk to them, which then creates a very jaded, even more jaded perception. Because let's be real, a lot of women in general have a jaded perception of men, but when you are in that position, it makes it worse. It kind of reminds me of, don't judge me and don't judge my peoples, but I got friends out there who've been strippers, right? Who stripped once upon a time in their life. The point is, when you talk to them, like, their perception of men is like they're disgusted because of what they see so much. When you're exposed at that level, it can really put on you a more negative perception of the opposite sex. Now, I want to remind y'all the same way I remind them. This doesn't represent all men. There are good men out there. There are healthy men out there. There are men who are good who may have some issues, but there are men who are willing to address their issues. There are men that you can establish healthy, loving relationships with. But I do understand how that can contribute to a lot of jadedness. So getting back to the point, deeper insecurities, deeper traumas that are perceived to be even more common amongst those women tend to make a lot of men shy away from them. All right, so let's keep this list going. And another reason why men will pick the quote-unquote plain Jane woman over the pretty woman, so to speak, is bad attitudes. All right. And so this pretty much goes hand in hand with entitlement. And even to some degree, the higher level of the demand she puts on the man. And sometimes that comes with an arrogant attitude, a bad attitude, someone who doesn't learn how to develop their personality in a way that makes them enjoyable to be around. And I think, you as women, you probably, if you think about your life, some of you can think of some of those women that were very pretty, got a lot of attention, but horrible character. Because what happens, unfortunately, and it's a human nature thing, it's not a woman thing, pretty woman thing, it happens to anyone. I always say, when you give people power before wisdom, it will create problems. All right. So let's use a man as an example for a quick second. If a young man grows up rich, right, and grows up having all kinds of access to women, a lot of times that young man grows up being a douchebag, being an a-hole, not developing a personality because he was given power before wisdom. And he got so accustomed to not having to develop other qualities about himself because he was used to his money, his connection, getting women, that he's now underdeveloped and way behind the ball. And when he gets older, he's like a grumpy old man, or he's boring as hell. He's lame. Like, so much is wrong because he was spoiled by the power. Well, that can happen to a lot of women as well, where if they were always accustomed to getting all kinds of attention and everything being very easy for them because men are constantly trying to cater to them, a lot of those women never learn to develop a personality, as well as they think they can just go through life being rude and nasty and ain't no one gonna call them out, because even if this person calls them out, the next person is trying to kiss their feet and make it easy for them. And so that makes them very difficult to be with. And that's why sometimes I'll see a lot of women like look at this woman on TV or whatever, and they say, how could she not have a man? Or, or how could someone cheat on her, right? And swear like something has to be wrong with men. But what y'all don't know is that woman is a devil behind closed doors. I'm sorry. Like, I hear and see so many of the behind the closed doors action that you may not be privy to. And I'm telling you, some of these women, they would drive you insane. All right. And if you really knew what was going on behind closed doors, if you really knew the energy and attitude they came with, you'd be like, oh, I get it now. I understand. All right. Because not everyone's bad attitude is out on full display. Some people are pretty good at hiding it. But once you get into a relationship or get close enough with them, now all of it starts to come out. So that bad attitude is definitely something that you'll hear men talk about with women who are viewed as too pretty, so to speak. All right. And before I move on to the next reason, be sure to go to my store where you can get books, you can get coaching sessions, you can get whatever you need. It's all at stephanspeakshop.com. Click the link in the description or in the comments section. Check it out. You'll find exactly what you're looking for. All right, so next on the list, and I basically already mentioned it, but we'll just reiterate it real quick. The other reason why men choose the quote-unquote plain Jane woman over the overly pretty woman is lack of personality. So again, a lot of men will have stories of women who were so beautiful, body was so amazing, and she was boring. She was boring, she was irritating, annoying. She just had no personality. You can't have fun with her. You can't have a discussion with her. Like, none of that was going on. Now, I know that's something you hear more commonly amongst women saying that about men, at least as far as lack of conversation. All right. But believe it or not, again, this happens on the other side. There's a quote that says, good men go through the same thing good women go through. Now, granted, there may be some tweaks here and there, some small differences, but at the foundation of it, it is extremely similar. The complaints are the same. The unfortunate reality is that good women and good men are struggling to find each other, embrace each other. And I have to say this, forgive me, okay? But they're also struggling with making themselves more desirable to each other. Now, I won't go too far down this rabbit hole right now, but I really think, and I'll put it in this context because I think it'd be easier for you to receive and understand it. You know, when good men say to me, oh, these women don't appreciate a good man, and boom, 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 boom. But I'm looking at him and it's like, okay, you dress sloppy. You don't have your stuff together. You live at your mom's house, whatever the case may be. Like, you have controllable aspects in your life that you have not handled that would make you more desirable. You don't take care of yourself. You know what I'm saying? You don't have anything going on in your life. Like, it's not that she doesn't want the good man, but she wants a man that embraces certain qualities or has developed certain qualities that you may still be lacking. And I think that for a lot of women, sometimes we get comfortable in defining ourselves as good, but not recognizing where we need to be better. All right. And what areas of our life that we need to work on and improve upon that makes us more desirable partners. But I digress. To get back to the point, lack of personality is definitely a common reoccurrence in these situations. And it just leads to, I think especially as men get older, I think when a man is younger, it's easier for him to get blinded by looks. It's easier for him to become so infatuated that he will ignore all these things. But once men have aged, evolved, matured, or they've been burned, if we're going to be real with it, been burned by these types of experiences, they put even more emphasis on the quality of her character and her personality. But none of this means that the man just starts blatantly ignoring attraction and looks. And though I used the example earlier of the guy in the barbershop who went from an 8 to a 5 and was happy, I would argue that at the 5, he still was attracted to her. I think everyone has a line. Some people's lines are lower than others, right? But everyone has a line. When people say looks don't matter, what you're really saying is looks don't matter as much to you as maybe the next person or maybe the average person. But there's a point that if I showed you a certain type of individual, you'd be like, I ain't doing that. Like, that's too much. You've gone too far, okay? So I do think that with men, though they do start to shift away from prioritizing looks as much, it's still a piece of the puzzle. So I don't want to act like that just goes away. All right, now I told you in the beginning, I want to give 2 other toxic reasons why a man might choose a plain, quote unquote, plain Jane woman over an overly pretty woman. Because listen, the reality is that there's 2 sides to this. Not everything is going to be it's not going to be good. Okay. And I mean, we can talk about some of these other reasons I've listed weren't, to some of y'all may feel like they weren't good reasons. I think most of y'all would agree with them as though, but let's get to it. I'm dragging on too much. Let's get to it. So number 1, and again, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just being real with y'all. First reason why some men choose a quote unquote plain Jane woman over the pretty woman, easier to control. Okay. Now again, I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. Okay. But the reality is that for all the reasons why I mentioned earlier, some men do this because to them, I can manipulate and control that woman easier. Because here's the thing that I think people overlook. When a man is intentionally trying to manipulate, control, use a woman, his target, a lot of people think the target will simply be about youth. Like the younger woman will be the easier to control woman. It's not really true. That's not the mind of the narcissistic man who's trying to get away with all kinds of stuff. The target is the woman who has less options. All right? Because if she has less options, she is more susceptible to accepting his nonsense. Because his perception is she can't go nowhere else. Because whether you're younger, older, whatever, if you got a bunch of men coming at you, that man knows if I don't come correct, there's another man easy that might slide in and take you away, right? But if I don't have to worry about the threat of a bunch of other men, oh, I have more time to play here. I got an easier route here. So there are men who look at it from that perspective. And you just want to be mindful of that. And I think, we have videos on what men do to try to use a woman and things of that nature. But I want to throw this in there before I make the next point. Again, be mindful of the man who isn't trying to equally pour into you. Be mindful of the man who's taking, but not really giving. Some of you fall into that trap because you have an issue of codependency, and you want to pour into a man and build him up and make him feel good because that gives you value. That makes you feel good about yourself. But you don't realize you are setting the stage, or you are allowing the stage to be set for you to be continuously used and drained. All right. If he is not willing to pour into you the way you pour into him, and when I say the way, not in the exact same ways, but he gives you in the ways that uplifts you and makes your life better, and you do the same for him, then that means he needs to go. And if he is not capable, and maybe that's why you're giving him so much leeway, you got to be careful with that, because even, let's just use money real quick. Even if he's not in a position right now to provide for you, there are other ways and aspects of life that he can take burdens off your back, that he can make life easier for you and pour into you. If he is unwilling to do that, he is probably a user. All right. And sometimes users don't come looking all like bad guys or being abusive. Sometimes they look like nice, innocent people, but the whole time they're playing games. So be mindful of that. All right, so I got another one, and I actually gonna add a third reason that y'all might be a little surprised by. So the second reason, and I already mentioned it, but I'm just gonna say it again. The other toxic reason why a man would choose the plain Jane woman is because he views her as easier to use. So we just talked about it. Easier to manipulate, easier to use, unfortunately, easier to control. All right, and it's for all the reasons that I mentioned, so we don't really have to go through that whole thing again. I will say this, though, before I move on. I mentioned money just a second ago. Whenever I see men who just started to date a woman, and I see it from their side or the woman telling me about it, and they're quick to ask you for money, that's just a huge red flag to me that this man is trying to use you. Because I always say, listen, when a man's really into you and serious about establishing a relationship with you, he understands the money dynamic with women and men. And the last thing he wants to do is look like he ain't got it or he can't take care of you, whatever. So he's not going to ask. Now, it's one thing for him just not to be able to provide. It's another thing for him to ask for you to give it to him. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's where it's like, wait a minute. He's a little too comfortable. And when it happens so fast, that leads me to think he's targeting this woman for that purpose. Just wanted to throw that out there. But now, the last, I guess you can call it toxic, reason why some men choose the quote-unquote plain Jane woman over the overly pretty woman is because the plain Jane woman is viewed as more likely to be freaky in the bedroom. Okay? Let me first start from the perspective of the pretty woman. A lot of men, have stories of like the overly pretty woman being just trash in bed. No disrespect, but that's just the way they're describing it, all right? And again, it goes back to the woman so used to being catered to in a way that men are trying so hard that she never learns to develop those areas in her life. Now, of course, this is not talking about the woman who's waiting till marriage and things like that. That's a whole different ballgame. But we're talking a woman who is engaging in it, and we're not going to get into the right and wrong about that right now, but the woman who's engaging in it, and the man then experiences her, and it's just like this was nonsense to him. However, on the flip side, feels like the woman who's not that overly pretty woman is much more open, is much more willing to be flexible in the bedroom, pun intended, is much more willing to make sure he's good, to cater to his needs, to pour into him, you know what I'm saying, and to be into the experience. And so, yes, some men will choose women based off of that. some are choosing that woman and will still marry her, and some will just choose it just to have sex on the side. And that's when you'll see some situations where the man will, sometimes you'll have dynamics where the man is in a relationship or he's even married. He's cheating with a woman. The woman he's cheating with is less attractive, but he gets more out of her in intimacy than he gets out of his main woman. All right. And with that side woman, sometimes, and this is how you know that he may view her as less attractive or he's not as attracted to her, is he hides her. He ain't like, well, that's a tricky one. Only if he's hiding her and he has no one else, then I think it's easier to apply that idea that maybe he's viewing her in that way. Because if he's in a relationship, then he's hiding her because he ain't trying to get caught. Anyways, the point is, yes, intimacy, how people get down in the bedroom, plays a role in why men choose one type of woman over the other. And so ultimately, this is just one of those videos where I just want to give you perspective. Please do not get discouraged by it. It's to be educated and aware of what's going on so that you can better navigate through these waters, right? So you can reach your proper destination of where God wants you to be to receive the blessing he has for you. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to watch this one over here on the harsh truth about dating men today that we need to talk about, all right? And so one of the harsh truths about dating men today that you have to be aware of is that most men lack healing, all right?
Thank you.